In this chapter, we'll be talking about some of the essential functions that you need to know in Excel as an intermediate user. So, the first thing I would like to point out is that I have an excellent guide called Excel Cheat Sheet, which is available for purchase on Merit CANZ website. You can access this at www.meritcanz.com/Excel. Here you can purchase our videos as well as this Excel guide with thousands of formulas to work through, and this is the basis of what I will be working off in this video. The most commonly used formulas are highlighted in green with excellent examples to work through. So this is the if function, and this is one of the most commonly used functions in Excel, and it's one that you need to be across. It's very important because it allows you to test a condition. What that means is you will set a statement. For example, Alan's sales are greater than his target. The if function allows you to set an output if the answer to this is true, and it allows you to set an output if it is not true. Those are the only two options. It is true or it is not true. It allows you to do some complicated formulas, and it allows you to map and nest things on top of each other for increased functionality. So let's take a very simple example, which is looking at whether or not these three staff members have met their sales targets. We can use the if function to test this and determine an output as to whether they've not achieved it or achieved their target in text. The formula is quite simple. The logical test is C4 greater than or equal to D4, where C4 equals sales and D4 equals target. If C4 is greater than D4, i.e. if sales is greater than target, I want the text to say achieved, and if it's not greater, I want the text to say not achieved. This is achieved with this formula here, but remember, whenever you are writing text into a formula, you need to include the commas. Otherwise, Excel will struggle and won't understand what you're saying because it'll think you're including a formula called achieved. You'll get let's see what happens when I take away these apostrophes. You will get the hashtag name error because Excel thinks that these are formulas, which they're not. So that's a basic example of the if function. Why don't we try it with numbers now? The following example is below. We want to be able to calculate the dollar amount of their sales commissions for Alan, Bob, and Carol based on whether or not they met their sales target. If they've met their sales target, they get 10% bonus. If they don't meet their sales target, they get 5%. So the formula we can use is almost the same, so it's still the same logical test. The logical test is if sales is greater than the target. Now the value, if they're true, is the 10% of sales. So what we want to do is we want to go C43 times 10%. The next one is C43 times 5% if the sales are lower than the target. The next thing we're going to be talking about is nesting a formula. What nesting a formula means is we're including two formulas in the same formula. So in this case, we're combining the if function and we're combining the and function. So what the and function does is it requires two different statements to be true. For example, in this scenario, the discount is provided on certain product lines, but only if two conditions are met. The first condition is that the product must be on special offer. The second condition is when the order value must be greater than $1,000. So in this case, we can use the AND function and go special offer is the first condition, and order value greater than 1,000 as the second condition. We can then combine that with an if statement like so. If that's true, i.e. they're both true, then we can do our discount. And if not, no discount. So the formula is going to look something like that. that in theory is what a nested formula looks like. You can nest all kind of functions together. If and is a very common one, so is if or. So let's see how that works in practice. So the and function is C58 is a special order, and D58, i.e. the order value is greater than 1000, so that makes sense. Now let's check it from the if function perspective. So if both of those are true, then it should be the order value times 10%. That's the discount. If not, it's 0. Okay, that makes sense. And then the total is that minus that. The next thing I want to talk about is the choose function. So the choose function is one of those formulas that you often use, and people should know it, but it can also be replaced by the index match function. So what the choose function does, give you a value for options 1, 2, and 3, which are defined by you. In this case, we have 5 different races, and we've been provided what rank they've had at the end of the race. Carol's come first, Alan's come second, Eric's come third, Bob's come fourth, David's come fifth. What we want to do is basically create this choose function so that it tells us what medal they're going to receive based on their position. So the if function and the choose have been nested. This formula is saying, first of all, let's have a look at the choose function. Basically how this works is the choose function is saying, look at D30. Depending on what number that is, select the following. If it's number 1, it's gold. If it's number 2, it's silver. And number 3, it's bronze. We've also got this, a nested if function. So what this function is saying is, if D30 is less than 3, i.e. their position's less than 3, which means they must have been gold, silver, or bronze, then do a choose function, which pulls out either gold, silver, or bronze, depending on whether they're 1, 2, or 3. And if not, well, clearly they must have not placed, which gets us these output. However, this choose function can be replaced by the index match formula. Sometimes it's best to just learn the index match formula, so you can replace the choose, the VLOOKUP, and sometimes even the SUMIF formula. But it is good practice to know all of the formulas so you can pick and choose. So, the workaround to using the choose function is the index match formula. So let's quickly draft up what that would look like. First of all, we need an index formula. That basically looks like this. First of all, you choose an array. I want to choose, basically, this mapping over here, whether they've received gold, silver, bronze, or unplaced. I'm going to lock that. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to lock that by pressing F4, and then I'm going to press comma to move on to the row number. Now the row number, depending on whether I press 1, 2, 3, it's going to be gold, silver, or bronze. That's all we need to know. So let's just go 1 for now so you can see what happens. And column number, I'm going to press nothing at all because there's only one column. So if I press 1, the answer should be gold because it's the first one down. And yes, that's the case there. The next thing is to add in the match formula. So instead of 1, what I want it to be is a dynamic formula which looks up whatever this position is over here. And I'm going to lock that as well. And I'm going to make it choose from this table over here. So if it looks at number 2, it's going to go the second one down. And I'm going to lock this and press 0 for match type. And there we have it, an index match formula which works just as well. And that is the choose function and the index match function. We've also got these counting functions over here. So counting functions are very similar to the sum and SUMIF functions. But instead of adding up the values, like 60, what it's going to do is it's going to say how many cells are there, or how many instances are there. The answer is 3. What about in this case here? We've got 3 values there. That should be 3 as well. What about over here, where there's a blank in the middle? That's only going to be 2. What about here, where there's an error in the middle? that's going to be 3 as well. And text is going to be 3. But if you use the count formula, what happens is it ignores the text, it ignores the errors. It only picks up the values. And that can be useful sometimes, or it can be a pain sometimes as well. So if we do want to pick up the errors in the text, we can actually use this variation over here, which is the count A. So as you can see, the difference over here is you can press count A, it picks up all values, no matter what, regardless of whether they're text, error, etc., whatever. You can also count blanks using the count blank formula, so equals count blank, select your range, and it'll just count all of these blank cells. So for example, votes not registered, so no cells where there's a blank value, they can be important. So just like sum and sumif, count also has a countif formula. And this works in almost the identical way in which you choose a range and you choose a criteria. For example, the items, and we're looking for brakes. So there are 2 brakes there and 3 tires there. So quite simple formula, equals countif, then range, and then criteria. You can also do countif S and look up multiple criteria. So for example, countif S C4, C11. So that's the criteria range 1, and then comma criteria range. So we're going to look up the maker in here, and we're going to look up Ford. And the second criteria, we're going to look up the spare part, and we're going to look up ignition. So it's going to count all of the Ford ignitions. Similarly, for Vauxhall gearbox, you can select a cell, and it's going to look up Vauxhall in here and gearbox in here, and it's only going to pull ones which are Vauxhall gearbox. So these two, these two here. So that's the countifs. So the next thing we're going to be talking about is rounding. So rounding can be important for formulas because decimals can make a big difference to your final outcome of your formulas. So hence where rounding formulas come in. Now, rounding is a mathematical principle, and basically we choose how many decimal places we want. So first of all, the formula is round bracket, choose the number that you want to round, and number 2, choose the number of digits that you're rounding to. So in this case, this is the number, and we're rounding to 0 digits. That brings us to the nearest whole number. We can do it with 1 decimal place, that's to the nearest 0.1, to the nearest 0.01, and so forth. You can also do negatives, which go the other way, etc. Now, there's also these rounding up and rounding down formulas. By default, mathematical formulas round up to the nearest x value, but you can also round up to the nearest how many 10,000s and so forth, which can be handy. For example, you might have a value of 13,000 and you want to round to the nearest 1,000, in which case you might want to use this formula here, round down to the -3. And same for round up. So you can do equals round up to the nearest -3, it's going to round up to the nearest 1,000. Okay, so what I'm going to walk through is this mod function. So this is a very underrated function, and most people look at it and don't understand how powerful it is. So this is used very commonly in Excel modeling. So first of all, let's try and understand what the formula does, and then let's think about why an Excel model would use this formula. So the mod function basically takes a number, so C4, and it divides it by another number, in this case 6. What mod does is it calculates the remainder after a number has been divided by another one. So for example, if we divide 20 by 7, well, it's going to be 2, and that's going to get us to 14. That means we've got 6 left over. So as you can see, the output of the mod function is the 6 left over. Same with 9. Divided into 2 is 8, which means there's 1 left over, and so forth. So why is this important for modeling? Well, it's important because we can set an input for a number of months repeated. For example, it might be a 6 monthly charge that hits the P&L. We can actually change this number and look at these formulas. So these are the months up here. So month number 1 through to number 12. What happens if we put this to number 6? In this current formula, if we put an if function in there, as soon as we get to a month where the mod of that number is 0, it means that it's repeated in that month. Does that make sense? So if we go 6 divided by 6, there's no leftover, which means if we add an if function to the mod saying if that's equal to 0, make this a trigger, a flag, a 1. Okay, that's why there's a 1 there. For all the other ones, because there is leftover, these are all 0. And that means we can create this dynamic calculation where we can put 3 months in there, and then every 3 months, we're going to get a 1 showing up. And after that, so this is what's called a flag. After that, we can use those flags to create these dynamic formulas, which only kick in whenever this is a 1. So if we want a charge showing up every 3 months, what we can do is just say that times x, whatever the charge is. And then it will pop up every 3 months. Want to do it every 12 months? There we go. Want to do it every 1 month? Every month. So very dynamic way of setting up your model over a monthly period. Okay, and now we've got some other functions. So we've got dates and now and date. So these are dynamic functions. So we've got the today date, which just brings you today's date. We've got the now function, which brings you the exact timestamp of now. And we've got the today, now, date. So the date function is a way of converting number of days, month, and year into a single time format that we can use. So just some high-level formats we can use. So for one instance, we might use the now function for a review log. So you can say reviewed by Max at this time. And then what we'll do is we'll just hard code it by pasting special. So because these formulas are dynamic, which means they're always updating. So we might hard code that one as well. We can potentially turn the date function into a way of making our model up to date. So we can set the first month in our calculation up here based on an end of month formula, which we'll talk about a little bit later, but just to show you the possibilities that we can do with this. There we go, the 31st. And then next month when we run it on the 1st of June, the report will automatically update to June as well. So those are just some of the high level best functions that you need to know to be good at Excel.